All right, we are back with Crossing the Access, the biz side of video production. I am Max Kaiser, your host. I am also the founder of Video Pipeline.io, also known as Pipeline, the production management platform, an all-in-one platform that you can use to help get your company organized and profitable. Before that, I spent 15 years in the video production business. And one of the people that absolutely shaped my experience in so many ways, including helping my company to land our first national ad with Zulily, was the man I am happy enough to have with us today, Shane Dillon of Light Press TV. Shane, say hello.
Hello, and thank you for having me on, Max.
Shane, thank you for everything over the years. You've always been someone that have been a great person to springboard ideas off of. You've always encouraged me to aim high in my work, and you've always done the same in yours. Can you tell us a little bit about Light Press and what Light Press does?
So we're, I guess we call us a post-production company based here in Seattle. Been going now for 12 years, I believe, as Light Press, and we mainly do color correction and finishing, but we also scan film still and finish that and do restoration and what I would call invisible effects.
And who are your clients?
So our clients we've got a real wide range of different clients. So we finish several features a year. For major studios. We also work on a couple of different TV series, title sequences, some which we're allowed to talk about, some we're not. We also have a lot of corporate clients, especially here in Seattle with people like T-Mobile, Amazon, Microsoft, all the usual lot. But we try to spread our clients around, so we're not kind of in one area all the time. So we work weird hours at the moment. We're coming in very early because we've got some clients based on the East Coast, and it's worked out well for us, really. We've been very lucky.
So just so my listeners, Light Press is one of those very high-end operations that you dream of doing your post work in. We were lucky enough to work with them on a few of our bigger productions, and it was just a dream come true. You have the just absolute magicians able to pull off anything with some of the most high-end gear that will just blow your mind in the power that these devices have. And of course, the skills that people like Shane and the others, Eric, that work with him there have. But I thought the other interesting thing about talking to Shane, talking to a post house person, would be to talk about the vantage point that you have on production companies coming through, because you sort of see them in that clutch time at the end of the project. And you see the clutch relationship between them and their clients. And I just thought, what an interesting thing it would be to talk to you about what it is that you see in the companies that work, that don't work, that are disastrous with their clients, that are great with their clients. What is the difference maker from your point of view for these production companies that you are kind of in this interesting vantage point on? I was just kind of curious if I thought that would be a really good jumping off point for us to talk about. If you had some things that you just saw over the years that you said, when that kind of person comes in as a production company, I know they're going to be successful.
Right. Well, things have changed a lot in the years definitely the years that I've been doing that. I kind of flew right into the kind of mid-90s where, and I'm sure it's the same for production, that equipment was a lot more expensive than it is today. And so you kind of had a barrier to entry is what I would say, because just the sheer cost. Now, and there's some good things about this. The cost of equipment has come right down. So there's a lot more, players that are actually in the field.
Right.
When I first started that, with the Quantel systems, they're over $1 million each. So you didn't get even, the wealthy trust fund kids or just freelance people couldn't afford to buy one of those. So it was a select kind of group that used that. And even with the, cameras that people were shooting on, you always knew that a production company that had, a certain camera rig and certain lenses, that if they have that, then chances are they've done some pretty big projects and know how to use them. And to be honest, they have to know how to use that equipment in order to pay for it. I mean, if they, screw it up and they don't get any clients, they're going to have a huge, debt hanging around their neck, and they're not going to last very long. And so, what I've seen here over, recent years, it's, whereas back in the, should we say the early days, you had a lot of big companies and a lot of support people supporting, the main owners. That's not really the case now. I've worked on some pretty big productions, and just that there seemed to be a lot more planning than there is now. And so I'm really keen with what you're doing, because I mean, purely, pipeline's a tool for helping with the planning stage of stuff. And one of the thing that kind of is difficult for us now is, especially with the pandemic, a lot of people are in their kind of flexi time mode, but, communication always separates for the clients that we have, knowing it's going to be a good client or bad client. It's just the history, whether or not the communication was good. I mean, we used to only have the, let's say, you pick up the telephone call or meet them in person. That was the communication. You could have that and get an answer by, calling somebody. Now we still have those options, but you've got texting, email, messaging, Zoom, Teams, Slack or whatever. And quite often what I find now is, I'll have a critical question and I'll put it out there, and you'll see little dots that somebody's read it and I don't get an answer. And it can be infuriating where, people don't pick up the phone even. And, I ask often, I say, hey, I emailed, I texted, I called, I did everything, why don't you answer? And they'll often say, well, I don't have an answer, so I don't want to answer. But it doesn't, change the fact that there's a problem that needs to be resolved. And that's kind of, I don't know if it's just a case of, new generation just do things differently. Actually somebody, I've been lucky enough to have a lot of good mentors in my time. And one of the guys I was talking to this week told me and said, what he finds is, he goes, you can't outrun the issue, but people these days think they can jog slightly in front of the issue and pretend they have headphones on. And that's exactly what it's like. I'm just like thinking, yeah, they're ignoring me. I know they've read this. Why aren't they answering? And so I love that fact. And one of the things, Max, that, how, I always like to work is, and with anything, it's just saying, okay, very early on, say, right, what's the plan? What are you exactly, trying to do here? And then, what are the rules? Let's focus on getting your plan made, to these set of rules you're going to give me. And, that could be a set for us, like, we're marketing this certain product. This product needs to look good. It needs to hit, all these demographics and, hit all these, points, right? And then I want to, okay, well, who's in charge of all the stages that we're going to be in? And, whether it's, the director or producer or even the client, are we involved, post, or do we get to speak and communicate with the client? Because some agencies want to keep the post house away from the client, and, they just want to use the producer as the conduit between, the client and the post house. But, I always want to be efficient, and the, successful jobs that we do. I mean, at the end of the day, if the job looks great and it hits all the marketing points and the client feels like they've got value for money, everything's great. The client's king and they're going to pay and everyone gets paid or whatever. But, behind the scenes, Max, it's always how much did it really cost, or how much time was wasted? Because if anybody along that whole, collaboration end up doing 10 times the amount of hours that they agreed to do and didn't get paid for it, there's going to be a bad taste in their mouth, and they're probably not going to want to work, with that client again. So I always look at, things at the end of a job, think, okay, how do we get from A to B? And then, I love to have a communication with, the agency for us, or, if we're dealing directly with the clients, okay, if we were to do this again, this is how we could do it much more efficiently or improve on what we've done. And really every single time it comes down to, okay, we can prepare more and we've just got to communicate. And, the best jobs that I've done on, it's always been, you've either got a really, really good producer that said, okay, we're going to communicate, we're going to put everyone on there, and we're going to hold people accountable if, deadlines are missed, or, there's a miscommunication, and, you completely go down a path which is, completely wrong for what the client's objective is. So honestly, Matt, I can't stress it enough. It's just, the communication and
it's also being honest. It's the communication, but it's also that hierarchy. And I think that's really important for people to understand, is how important a hierarchy can be in the arrangement during post-production. And that the hierarchy also allows you to know who you're supposed to be communicating with, right? And I think it's really helpful for prodcos going into a major post session, or even just if they're working with an agency through their own post session internally, just to realize that hierarchy is so critical. Can you give me an example of what a good hierarchy might look like?
Well, it's hard. I can give you lots of examples of bad ones. I mean, it all comes down to, on any part of the project, so the total time spent, or could be the total time wasted, versus, what you've actually billed for, or what the client's paying for at the end.
Right.
And so usually the fewer people that are involved, the smoother the project comes. And on some of the larger projects, I always remember, actually in Austin, working on the movie, and the director is a quite a well-known director, was kind of stressing. He said, well, the difference between a $25 million movie and a $40 million movie, especially if it's like a visual effects movie, can be quite apparent. But the difference between a $40 million movie and a $120 million movie is just that you've got a bunch of people that are just going to get in the way and add no worth at all to the end product. All they're going to do is say, well, do you think that person should wear a different type of pants? Or, what if we tried this? And it's stuff that isn't important. People are there, whether it's on set or in a edit room, making decisions that don't really matter. They're just asking to do something for the sake of doing it. So if you can cut down the numbers, say, okay, I just want to, have the people that matter, because and I'm sure that, you remember some of the clients that you've had, is that you think you're dealing with the person that matters, and you'll, ask for feedback, and you'll address everything and give them what they want. And then, okay, now we have to run it by so-and-so. And they've got it completely wrong. And it's like, well, we've wasted all this time doing, X, Y, Z, or whereas if we would have just had that communication initially with the person that matters, we could have avoided, these weeks of waste and whatnot. And it's fine if, and from Post House's situation, that's fine if people want to pay for that. And but if they don't, then it's a big problem. And one of the biggest thing is unbillable time. If somebody says, hey, I'm going to be ready to do this on this date, and then they change their mind, and you've got, either, freelance staff you've employed, or if you're in production, I guess, you've rented equipment and hired people, and then you can't use them on that day. And you've got you've got a cutoff time when you can, cut them off and say, hey, the job's being pushed. But if it's like last minute, somebody's got to eat that cost. And that's one of the reasons we very, very, very rarely do, jobs where people come up and say, hey, how much is it going to cost? Can you do this for this amount of money? We'll say, well, for that amount of money, this is what we can do. We always turn it that way. For your money, this is what we can do. We never say yes to a blanket, everything. And we get clients say, hey, how much is it going to cost to finish my video? And they say, well, how long is the video? We don't know how long it's going to be. I'm like, well, I can't give you even a close price. You don't have any information. And so You don't need me telling you that. I'm sure you've
What
had
are
exactly
what are
the
some
same
of the
info.
what are some what's interesting, I think, for our listeners are primarily production company owners, and one of our challenges is working with agencies, right? Like that's just a challenge. It's an interesting, sometimes it's a matter of, well, who's really in creative control here? Sometimes it's a matter of hierarchy. What situations have you seen where you're like, that's a great example of a production company working well with an agency? Again, I just feel like you have that unique seat at the table to be able to sort of be a removed party from the relationship. And obviously it's good when they're communicating well, and it's good when there's a hierarchy, and it's good when they're organized, and all those things are good. But, the crunch time is in the room with you, working through the ideas. And which companies have you seen work well with the agencies, and which companies have you seen get stuck with the agencies, and why?
Well, so, some of the bigger agencies, and it really does, as I said, earlier, come down to a really good producer, and sometimes that producer may be a fabulous show person.
Yeah.
That even early on has kind of controlled the narrative with the client and said, "Hey, this is this dream we've got, or it's a collaboration. We're gonna hit this, and everything's gonna look absolutely amazing, and people are gonna love it, and they're gonna love your idea." And they kind of sell that whole service. And if then the client feels at ease with that agency, say, "Hey, this agency knows what they're doing," they can relax a bit. But what I've seen is that the producer will carry that on, and it could be the director that's doing this this kind of showmanship, shall we say, where they'll have something, they'll shoot it, and you'll have the client actually in the where they're previewing it on set. And the director's going, "Oh, that looks amazing. It's going to look even better every step of the way. It looks fantastic. That was a really great idea that you had," and they'll kind of sell that. And then when they come into the edit room, they're like, "Hey, look how amazing that looks. I'm so pleased with this." And then you just kind of see these guards come down. And if the client feels that they know that all the people in all these different jobs are really the professionals that they are, they can kind of relax. Say, "Okay, well, they've hired a really good DP. They're choosing the right angles and the right lenses. It looks amazing. I can just relax." The director is getting the action. They've hired great talent, and the director is, making everything look great. My product looks fantastic, whatever it is I'm selling. Or, if it's a feature film, I'm getting the emotion that's in the script. They're pushing that all the way through. But then even when it comes to finishing, it's just this whole communication the whole way. Because on the reverse side of things, watching, the guys here when they're grading, I mean, they've done amazing work for amazing people. And the best stuff is where, the client even will say, "Hey, Jeff or Eric or whatever," and say, "Hey, looking at this footage, this is the kind of emotion or the point I'm trying to get across here in this scene. And looking how it's being, filmed and the art direction, what do you think it should be?" And you'll see the colorists just kind of open up and go, "Yeah, okay." And they'll do stuff. And they've got, years of experience at work with different people. And they'll do something, and it always looks fantastic. It looks better, blown away. But then sometimes you'll get somebody that really doesn't respect the skills at any stage of what they've hired, and they try and take over or second guess people, and just kind of they upset them, the professionals in the end. And you'll just see any step people just switch off. So, "You know what, this isn't a collaboration, this is just them saying what they think they want to do," or they viewed something, another project that they're trying to copy and plagiarize. And so you'll see people just, "All right, I'm just going to give you what you want to get you out of my face."
Right.
And, the colorist is like, "Okay, yeah, right. You want it to look like, Matrix. Yeah, we're going to make everything green, and you can just get out. And I'm never going to mention that I've done this or show it on our reels. And I don't even want a credit for it." And I've been in situations where that's happened so many times. And the same thing with the agencies. You can just tell that the client is switched off, and they're not happy with the way the agency is handling things. but they've gone down. They know that they've gone so far down that, like, you know what, we're just going to finish this, but we're never going to use this agency again.
Right.
This relationship is done. And been in many times rooms that, and it's kind of awkward. And you know, the client says, yeah, that's good enough. Let's just move on. I don't want to be here any longer, kind of thing. And you just have to kind of chew it up. And sometimes you can, you know, pull something out of the fire and say, hey, you know, we can make something good out of this. Don't worry. And then they might relax a bit and have something that they've used. But we've had clients come to us before, after the agency's gone, and they say, hey, we want you to change everything. Can you help us with that? We don't want to use the agency. And it's a real awkward situation.
Yeah.
And usually it's like, okay, how do we handle this? And so well, I'm going to actually call the client and say, look, you know, we didn't pursue them under anything. And, you know, we're not going to, you know, promote the fact that we work them separately.
Yeah.
But, you know, they wanted to redo everything before putting it on their own website. And I hope you're okay about that. And it's, you know, it's some people have been okay with it. Other people have been really upset and they don't want to see us or come with it again. Right.
Right.
So,
yeah. Wow,
it's kind of an awkward thing.
I'm sure it is. So what I'm hearing is obviously communication, then having some kind of hierarchy, obviously being organized, and then really being open to ideas and really true collaboration.
Absolutely.
You know, really being willing to engage and sort of not be so afraid of the idea that you're not open to how it can grow and change.
Right. Yeah. You know, champion all the time, champion your people and your staff, and, you know, tell them, say, hey, this, you know, oh, you're doing a fantastic job. This is great. It's better than I expected. And then, you know, and celebrate those successes. You know, push them, say, hey, you know, to the other client, we just did this job, and, you know, so-and-so, you know, he shot the thing beautifully. And, you know, and guess what? We came in under budget. You know, everything just worked as a cinch because we did this and did this, right. Or, you know, we got so much more than we could have expected. And I don't know, I can't remember if I ever spoken to you. One of the clients we had a while back was, remember BlackBerry? We started off BlackBerry, an agency, a very small agency that handled BlackBerry, approached and said, hey, we've got this, started off as a web video, a 3-minute web video. We went and shot this stuff with these execs using this new device, you know, in all these different countries. And, you know, we need it to look great and, you know, finish this thing. Can you tighten up the edit? So we did all that. And it was so successful for BlackBerry. They said, hey, can you cut this down into like just 2 30-second spots? We want to air nationally. I'm like, sure. So, you know, we had a guy come in, he cut it down, we graded it, and did, you know, some visual effects on it. And it was really successful. Next thing you know, that turned into 162 spots for just that one client. I mean, that was our big client for like 18 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it just exploded, and it, you know, it made this agency, and, you know, they went on and, you know, do a bunch of stuff at Apple and Google and whatnot. But that was just from this one initial idea, and it was a fairly small, you know, group of people that were working on this stuff. And they just kind of, you know, it was like, this is what we need to do, and this is how fast we need to do it. And, you know, one of the things about having you know, the old school sort of style post house is having kind of, you know, all the tools you might need under one roof, right? But it's not so much the tools. The tools could be the people or the artists and stuff there. So, but again, it's like, you know, I think experience just really helps, and you know, keeping those companies going is important. And, you know, for agencies, you know, they need to, or, you know, even large or small, you know, one of the things I've noticed is the ones that have actually gone bust, and the ones that have tried to, you know, either not charge what they should, you know, give everything away. I mean, I always tell people, say, hey, look, you know, charge. You've always got to charge what you should. I mean, because, you know, if you start discounting stuff, I mean, in my experience, it's always irreversible. You can never get the price that you should get once you've discounted it once. Yep. And if you give something away once, they're never, ever going to want to pay for that thing that you've given away, ever, on any stage of anything.
Right.
So I've always thought it's not, you know, it's not worth, you know, lowering your prices just to get a job. You know, people always say, hey, you know, then, you know, if you can help us with this one, you'll get the next big job. And it's like, well, that very rarely happens in my experience. So, we tend to say, well, we can't do that, but we can give you, help you out with certain things. And we, as opposed to always offer terms, for that price, this is what you're going to get, or this is when we could finish it, or this is the deadline that we can, actually keep to. We can't, have you, say, hey, I've got this job, you want to hold a whole week for like 3 hours of work. We just can't afford to do that. Yep. And we've seen that the other places that have kind of given over to that don't last. And, it's just kind of sad. Yep. I mean, it's fine, it's fine to say, hey, we can't help you this time, it's all right to say no, walk away. And even if you, my view is, even if you started something and if it's going really, really bad and early on that, hey, this isn't going to work out, the sooner you can walk away, probably the better for everybody, really.
So how do you, just changing gears here just a little bit, scope creep never comes in worse than it does during post. And obviously you are subject to scope creep like crazy. How do you control it? How do you keep it in line?
Basically dollar amounts. I mean, when people come in and say, hey, we need to make this change. I mean, we always give people more than what they paid for. I mean, you want people to always walk away with a smile on their face.
So you start with being really generous to begin with.
Yeah. So, but then when people come up and say, hey, we want to do this, it's okay. So, that we can do that change, but that small change is a $10,000 change.
Right.
And you can explain it that way. Or, especially for, whether it's television or features where you have a release date, or even commercial, if they bought, ad time, it's like, well, it might not be possible to do all those changes in that time scale that they're asking for. Or if there is, it's like, hey, we need to get like another 10 people working on this afternoon, which we can do, but it means you've got to make a decision right now to say you want to do this. And you can't say, oh, I'll get back to you tomorrow about that. So, well, if you get back to me tomorrow, I need time to get these people ready. And so usually, especially if the person's, if they're in the room with you or on the phone, it's like, all right, I need to know right now. Usually people then will think, okay, is the scope change worth that? This is something insignificant. Or the other time is sometimes, for post, if it's something small, I usually say, okay, well, the time wasted is going to be more time wasted in you guys getting back to me about whether or not you want to do that change. I can do it both ways. And then you can decide with both masters which one you're going to use. That's the cheapest way of doing it. And so sometimes it's, as I said, even if you're on set and somebody's asking about shooting one way or the other, time you've had all the meetings, the discussions, you might as well just shot it twice.
Right, exactly.
And be done with it. And I think sometimes experience brings that. I think, there are far too many useless meetings.
How do you protect against, you want to be a helpful collaborator on one hand, but on the other hand, that the minute you start letting the scope start creeping, you're dead. How do you balance that, being a helpful collaborator? I think this is where a lot of production companies, especially in the early years, this is where they get into a lot of trouble, and they want to be seen as that helpful collaborator, the yes man, these or woman. But how do you do that? How do you balance that line between being truly collaborative and helpful, but professional and stay getting paid?
and you know what, it really is that, as I got back to that, having the kind of show person, on production, whether it's a producer or a director that can really, sell an idea and say, well, this is the vision that we have, and this is what we need to do. And then of course say, we don't really need to do that. We've already got the magic in the can. And if we do this, this, and this, it's going to dilute the whole effect of everything.
Right.
Or, sometimes let's just do it. No, that doesn't work. But I'm glad we tried it, kind of thing. I'm glad we tried what you suggested, but it doesn't work. But it was worth trying. And then move on as quick as possible, because, there's scope change. And of course, with what it usually comes down to with us, in Seattle with a lot of the tech clients is often, you're working with a product that's still evolving.
Yes.
And so the product changes. And it's okay, well, this no longer does that, or the screens look completely different. And so sometimes, with experience, when you're talking about this, if you've got a plan already listed out, the plan hopefully has a timetable saying, well, whatever, this part of the whole process and getting everything finished, this last bit at the end takes this many hours. So if you push everything into that, then everything's going to push. And so if you can push your deadline and you have the budget, it isn't a problem, especially if the people are available. And usually they are when you're paying, in all honesty. But I mean, if they don't have budget and they don't have time, then it's a moot point. It's like, it's not possible without throwing lots of money at it, and you don't have the money.
Yeah.
And people are usually pretty understanding.
What about when they say those classic words? Well, I can't do it on this project, but if this project goes well, I'm going to get 5 more, and I'm going to bring you guys in on it with me. What do you say to those guys?
Oh, that's really hard. I mean, we get it a lot with feature films, and you know what? You always believe it the first time someone tells you, and then all of a sudden they get the big directorial job next time, and then they're doing it somewhere else. You're like, hey, you promised me, we did this, we did it for nothing, and you said we'd get the next big film, but now you're producing it in Hollywood. And they'll say, well, this might be my only chance to work in Hollywood, and the studio holds all the money, and so they get to say where the money's spent because they want to spend it in their owned camera house or whatever. So,
right. So you're saying it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So we'll say, well, we can help you a little. You say, well, we can help you by, making sure it's done on time. You'll get all your deliverables, and you make them the offer that you feel comfortable with, and you'll say, you know what, we'll give you the same offer for the next job as well.
Okay.
Because if you can say that, it's just not. Yep. It's not worth it, because unless I guess if somebody gives you a contract and, hey, this is the is it like a series? I mean, we get it here. Here's the pilot, and then if the pilot gets bought, you get to do the series of 10 episodes, and you say, okay, well, can you give me that in writing?
Yep.
Because if it doesn't happen, or you go somewhere else, we're going to bill you for that pilot that we did 6 months down the road.
Yep. Well, Shane, that is amazing. And we're just about out of time. I wanted to say one thing to listeners out there that may have never gone to a post house, and they may say to themselves, I have all these great tools. I've got DaVinci. I've got, why would I ever go to a post house? And Shane, I'm going to let you answer that in 1 second, but I'm going to go ahead and answer it for you, at least from my perspective and what I saw over the years. And the truth is, folks, if you want to see what, you've watched television all your life, you've watched movies all your life, and you see things that have that look of professionalism, that look of just looking so tightly finished, and all of the T's being crossed and the I's being dotted, and just the coloring, and even just the timing, some very, very, very minute things that come together to give you that perfect professional pitch production. That's what you get when you go to a place like Light Press. And even if you don't think you can afford to do it on each and every project, which you probably can't, it is so worth it to do it on a few a year, so that you can learn from just watching folks like Shane and Eric work and what they can do with your footage. You will learn how to be a much better shooter. You will learn how to be a much better colorist yourself. And you'll just generally have a much better sense of what that line is that's maybe kept your work from being at that super high level. Shane, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I would say, from a client's point of view, it's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I've got this much money, what can you do? Because then it cuts out all the dancing about, asking for every variation of everything, because sometimes it might just be, hey, for that, we can just take your finished locked spot and polish it. We could spend an hour on it, and it's going to look 100 times better.
Yes.
And that might be great.
I think that was all I could ever afford to do. And it did. That's exactly, and it worked out fantastically.
Totally. And sometimes it's like, okay, well, I've got this film, but I don't, you've got 6 months to work on it.
Right.
Great. We can help you with this because we've got 6 months to work on it. But you can't expect the same level of service. Oh, I need it by the end of the week to submit to a film festival. So, And in terms of if somebody's learning a craft, I mean, all the successful people I know have had really good mentors. They learn why you do something. It's often just because it has a button that says you press the button, it does this. Sometimes knowing why the button does that and technically why it's happening and technically why you can use it, it helps you so end. And it's you can always talk to anybody anytime to give you the advice before you start. If you can plan stuff, it's going to save you loads and loads of money down the road, because we've all heard that, we'll fix it in post. Well, don't forget, it's expensive. So if you've got the money to fix it, that's fine, but don't, if you can prevent that, then prevent it.
Yep. Well, thank you, Shane, so much.
Thanks so much.
This has been so fantastic. That Shane from lightpress.tv. Go check out their work, but more importantly, take some work their way if you can, because you won't regret it. You will have a fantastic experience. Your product will look great at the end of the day, and it is more achievable than you often think. Of course, they do tons of high-end, super high-end work, but you'd be amazed. And it can be that thing that takes your work up just the next level. So I really encourage it. But Shane, I love it. Just talking about communication, about hierarchy and organization, charging what you're worth, and being open to true collaboration with the folks you work with. Those are all incredible tips. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate you coming by, and I look forward to hanging out with you real soon, Shane.
I look forward to it too. You take care, Max.
Okay, you too. Thanks.